I'll call the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure to order. Pursuant to Committee Rule 6F and House Rule 11, Clause 2 HF, that the Chairman may postpone further proceedings today on any question of approving any measure or matter or adopting an amendment in which a recorded vote of the yeas and nays are ordered. I'd ask unanimous consent that the Chairman be authorized to declare a recess at any time during today's meeting. And without objection, that is so ordered. All bill and amendment texts have been distributed electronically, and paper copies are also available here in the hearing room. And finally, as a reminder, the committee will use an electronic voting system for any recorded votes that are requested. Today, the committee is considering H.R. 7671, the Disaster Management Cost Modernization Act, and an amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9750, the Natural Disaster Recovery Program Act of 2024. Finally, I'd ask unanimous consent that the committee use an amendments roster for any items under consideration by the committee. Without objection, that is so ordered. Our first item for consideration is going to be H.R. 7671, the Disaster Management Cost Modernization Act, and I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management from further consideration of H.R. 7671. Without objection, that is so ordered. I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I'd recognize myself for 5 minutes. Well, the Stafford Act does make a percentage of disaster recovery and pre-disaster mitigation grant dollars available for management costs. Under current law, each disaster management costs are tied directly to that declaration. The Disaster Management Cost Modernization Act would simplify administration for emergency managers by providing states flexibility and allowing these funds to be used across any open disaster. I now recognize Mr. Larson for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I support the Disaster Management Cost Modernization Act. H.R. 7671 gives states and local governments more flexibility when using FEMA assistance to manage response to major disasters. It also allows states to retain any excess management funds after disaster recovery is complete and use them for disaster preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. When managing disaster declarations, states administer FEMA grants that may be worth billions of dollars. FEMA allows states to utilize a percentage of these grants to cover the cost of administrative requirements and grant management. These management costs are strictly tied to each specific declaration. However, most states are managing recovery from multiple disaster declarations simultaneously. Therefore, all associated personnel costs must be tied to a specific declaration, program, and project. So this bill would build some help build state. This bill will help states build capacity when preparing for responding to the next disaster, and would recommend that members support this. I support this bill. Urge my colleagues to do the same and yield back.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the bill? Are there any amendments? Seeing none, we'll now proceed to final passage of the legislation. The question is now on the adoption of favorable reporting of H.R. 7671. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rouser.
I call for a roll call vote.
The gentleman requests a recorded vote on the bill as previously announced pursuant to Committee Rule 6F. Further proceedings on the question are postponed. Our final item for consideration is H.R. 9750, the Natural Disaster Recovery Act of 2024, and I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management for further consideration of 9750. Without objection, that is so ordered. And I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I recognize Mr. Rouser to offer his amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk in the nature of a substitute.
Please designate.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9750 offered by Mr. Rouser.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered as a base text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize Mr. Rouser for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the chairman and Ranking Member Larson for scheduling these two bills for markup today. I greatly appreciate their willingness to do that. Both bills are very important. And this particular bill I've been working on for a long time. As was discussed the other day, this measure, in my opinion, is sorely needed given the disastrous product that we have in the form of the CDBG DR program, Disaster Recovery Program, that's housed under HUD. That is a program that is just rife with all kinds of bureaucracy. When the state has an issue, they point their finger to HUD. When HUD has an issue, they point their finger to the state. And as a result, you have very little accountability. You have appropriated funds that are passed by the House and Senate, signed by the President into law, and 3 years later, still no action. 4 years later, no action. 5 years later, no action. A few people get a little help in between, but you still have hundreds in North Carolina, if probably not closer to 1,000 in my estimation or more throughout the state that have been without assistance in terms of housing and other recovery needs, and that's just unacceptable. This bill sets up a really simple grant program. The state would get 50% of their money up front. After verification by a state auditor or whoever the governor may choose to do an audit, goes to Congress, to the relevant committees, including this one, to take a look at how that money is being spent, as well as the appropriators who will take a very close look at how that money is being spent. And if everything checks out, they get the other 50% without having this hassle of going back and forth between HUD and the state of North Carolina in this particular case. So that's the whole purpose of the bill, of the idea, is get the bureaucracy out of the way, empower the states that much more, and of course there are certain statutory limitations on how the money can be used, and that's spelled out in the bill language. So it really takes a very complex, unnecessarily bureaucratic program and provides a much better option for states to pursue long-term disaster recovery assistance. So with that, I appreciate everybody's consideration and their vote. I want to again thank Mr. Larson and Ranking Member Larson and Chairman Graves for bringing these two bills to the floor or to the committee today for consideration. I yield back.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Representative Rouser's comments and to get the process going to bring this bill back. I know it was a priority for him, and also to get Mr. Negus's bill on the schedule as well. I did oppose this legislation at last week's markup. It was slightly different, but my concerns with the bill remain the same. The sponsors of the bill have advertised it as a replacement for the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program, or the CDBG-DR program, a program that's been supporting long-term disaster recovery for over 5 years, and HUD, Housing and Urban Development, has put significant work into improving the program over time. And most recently, HUD completed a public comment period for the program in which 100 stakeholder comments were submitted. And I acknowledge that this particular program is not perfect, but HUD is following a transparent process to make improvements. I've also received letters from 34 stakeholders opposing this bill before last week's markup, including the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, the Natural Resources Defense Council, Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, National Association of Counties, Habitat for Humanity, and the Union of Concerned Scientists. And the National Emergency Management Association and stakeholder groups representing local emergency managers have also sent letters in opposition. And I appreciate what members are trying to do. Frankly, on both sides of the aisle, they have important issues we have important issues to deal with. And I hope Representative Rouser and other members of the committee can find a bipartisan long-term recovery solution to this problem in the future. However, I'm going to oppose H.R. 9750 as I did last week and urge my colleagues to do the same. With that, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on that? Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Rouser for bringing this legislation up. This legislation includes a bill that Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett and I authored and has passed this committee multiple times. Mr. Chairman, I hear everybody's comments. I get it, but I also want to make an important distinction. Number one, Mr. Rouser and I have been through disasters. Congresswoman Plaskett has been through disasters. I guarantee you that there is not a person on this planet that has been through this HUD disaster program that would support this bill. There is not a person. I've given examples from home, and I hate the fact that we have as many examples as we do, but unfortunately, we've had more than our share of disasters. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give you a stat from one of the floods we had that I talked about at the markup last time. After a 1,000-year flood event that we had in 2016, we secured $1.7 billion through HUD's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program. We are 8 years later. We're 8 years later, and $700 million of the $1.7 billion have been given to homeowners. I'm going to say that again. 8 years later, through the HUD program, $700 million of the $1.7 billion has been given to homeowners for recovery. This is the program that people are trying to protect right now. I read the letter. I read the letter of opposition from folks. I guarantee you none of them have been through this before. The program is disastrous. Don't take my word for it. Read the GAO report that compared a program, Mr. Chairman, that we have jurisdiction over, the EDA program, Economic Development Administration program through the Department of Commerce, comparing that program and disasters to HUD's program. If I remember right, they said that in 18 months, EDA does what takes 6 years HUD to do. Look, I can't say this enough. Our recovery programs re-victimize disasters, our own federal government. The opposition letter that I read was opposed because they said that all we're doing is we're competing and we're creating another program that competes with the existing program. Let's be clear. Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery does not exist in law. It's not authorized, and it should never be authorized because the agency is wholly incapable of responding to disasters with any urgency. We have jurisdiction right now over disaster prevention. We have full jurisdiction over the Stafford Act, the actual disasters. Why should we not have jurisdiction over the full picture in the recovery as well, where we can ensure that things are being coordinated, that things are being dovetailed? I have watched as FEMA has literally kicked people out of trailers, yet the HUD dollars for recovery was not available for another 6 or 8 months. What are those people supposed to do? We need to have that full picture. And if people are concerned because we're potentially creating a competing authorization, where the hell are you when you have FEMA with Pre-Disaster Mitigation, Flood Management Authority, BRIC, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, Corps of Engineers, all their recovery programs. HUD has done recovery and resiliency programs through their CDBG DR flood management. Where's your opposition there? Ironically, one of the same groups that's opposing this came out and opposed an effort by this committee that thankfully the committee passed it anyway, and it's law today, opposed an effort whenever we tried to say that HMGP dollars, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program dollars through FEMA, could be used for a Corps of Engineer project, provided that it's consistent with the authorization. They oppose that whenever we're actually trying to bring things together. So there's no consistency in what these groups are saying, and I'm going to say what I said at the beginning. They've never been through this. They've never been through this. I'm speaking, and Mr. Rouser is speaking from the actual people on the ground that have been victimized by these programs, and he's providing a better alternative. That's what we're supposed to do here. I understand people's concerns, but I'm going to tell you over and over again, there's not a damn thing about this that's political. Nothing about this that's political. Zero. This is all about us trying to provide a more efficient solution. And I strongly urge that people exercise independent thought here and vote for this legislation. Yield back.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the bill? Seeing no one, I do. Mr. LaMoffa.
I don't want to go on about all the disaster we faced in Northern California with wildfire and stuff, but if Mr. Garrett Graves would like more time yielded to him, I would yield it. Would you like some more time, sir? You were on a good roll, or Mr. Rouser? Okay. Well, with that, I appreciate the effort by Mr. Rouser and being persistent on this and just getting basic help and the right timeline for disaster victims. And so I appreciate it. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing no one, I do want to thank Mr. Rouser and Mr. Graves for their work on this legislation, and I'd urge my colleagues to support it. Are there any other amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9750? Hearing none, the question is on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 9750. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Do what? No, yeah, that's the A&S. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. I forgot we had done that. The question is now on the adoption of favorable reporting of H.R. 9750 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay.
No.
In the opinion of the chair,
Chair. Chair, on that, ask to record a vote.
the gentleman requests to record a vote as previously announced pursuant to Committee Rule 6F. Further proceedings on the question are postponed. So we're going to briefly recess before we proceed on the two recorded votes. And we recognize that there's obviously committee activity going on everywhere. So what we are going to do, we will vote at 9:50. So we're going to recess until 9:50. The committee stands in recess subject. Committee on Transportation Infrastructure will reconvene the previously recessed markup. The committee previously postponed proceedings on H.R. 7671, which was favorably reported by voice vote. Is a recorded vote still requested? Recorded vote is requested. Members will record their votes using the electronic voting system. The vote will be open for 3 minutes. The chairman intends to vote aye.
Ranking will vote aye.
Open the board. Have all members been recorded that wish to be recorded? Do any members wish to change their vote? Hearing none, clerk, please close the vote and announce the total.
On that vote, there were 58 yeas and 2 nays.
By a vote of 58 yeas and 2 nays, the bill is agreed to and ordered favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The committee previously postponed proceedings on H.R. 9750 as amended. Is a recorded vote still requested?
Yes.
A recorded vote is requested. Members will record their votes using the electronic voting system. The vote's going to be open for 1 minute. The chairman intends to vote aye.
Ranking to vote no.
Open the board.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
apparently the reason we're voting on this bill again is that I've changed my vote, of course, and my office told me that never to admit I made a mistake, but I'm telling you I made a mistake, and I apologize to Congressman Rouser, so I apologize that we're back. But y'all get to spend another day with me, though, so it's kind of a +1 on that deal. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Have all members been recorded who wish to be recorded? Do any members wish to change their vote? Hearing none, close the board, announce the total, or what? Do what?
On that vote, there are 33 yeas and 28 nays.
By a vote of 33 yeas, 28 nays, the bill as amended is agreed to and ordered favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Thank you for participating in today's hearing. I'd ask unanimous consent that each measure ordered reported today be reported as a single amendment in the nature of substitute and according to any amendments adopted without objection as so ordered. I'd ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make all necessary technical, clarifying, and conforming changes to each of the measures ordered and reported today to reflect the actions of the committee without objection as so ordered. And pursuant to House Rule 22, Clause 1, I'd ask unanimous consent that the chairman or designee be authorized to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to go to conference with the Senate on the legislation adopted in any similar measure. And without objection, that is so ordered. And I'd ask unanimous consent that the chairman, after consultation with the ranking member, have authority to strike or revise any provision of the measures ordered reported today that would cause a sequential referral to another committee or that would cause the bill to be subject to the Budget Act or Rule 21, cut-go, point of order. Without objection, that is so ordered. Pursuant to House Rules 11, Clause 2L, I'd ask unanimous consent that all members of the committee have at least 2 calendar days in which to file any supplemental minority, additional dissenting votes on the legislation adopted today, and without objection, that is so ordered. Pursuant to Rule 6 of the Rules of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, I note the presence of a quorum for all actions on the committee today. And with that, the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has completed its business, and the committee is adjourned.